the water wars. Now, in 1880, you had guys like Dalton standing by his ditch with a shotgun. Well, today, instead of the shotgun, you've got your attorney sitting right next to you. And that's what happened in the 1940s. Lawsuits were filed. People were all of a sudden finding out that they had to get their foot in the door in order to establish these rights. And so the people in the Central and West Basin were putting a tremendous amount of pressure on the San Gabriel Basin to become organized, because we were taking water that really was in all rights, belonged partly to the people in the Central and West Basin. So the solution? We had to create something in the San Gabriel Valley that would allow us to be able to become organized and get an outside source of water to replenish the basin, not just take water off of the river. Now, in the San Gabriel Valley, it wasn't quite as amicable as it was over in Pomona. There were 4 cities. There was Azusa, Sierra Madre, Monterey Park, and Alhambra. Now, I don't know exactly what they were thinking, but my guess is, in what I've heard, it was mainly personalities. These 4 cities and the city fathers from those communities didn't get along with other people who were involved with the creation of the Metropolitan Water District, and they wanted no part of the Metropolitan Water District. So they were withholding their approval of wanting to become a municipal water district. Well, the people in the Central West Basin became very, very nervous, and they filed a judgment. Today they call that the Long Beach Judgment. They filed a lawsuit, basically trying to force the people of the San Gabriel Valley to come up with a solution to organize in order to bring in replenishment water. So the solution was the 4 cities decided to become their own municipal water district. That is referred to today as the San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District, made up of those 4 cities. Some of the representatives and board members are here today. The rest of the cities in the San Gabriel Valley, except West Covina, I see Mike Toohey over here. West Covina's always been kind of a rogue. West Covina said, we're just going to kind of hold our powder dry, and we're going to wait and to see what happens. So in 1959, both the San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District and the Upper San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District formed. One as a Metropolitan Water District agency in order to get access to Colorado River water, the other one to become a state water contractor. Now, there was one problem with becoming a state water contractor in 1959-1960. State water contractor didn't exist. So those 4 cities were rolling the dice. They were trying to find a way of getting imported water into the San Gabriel Valley, but they were really relying on an election that was going to be held in 1960. And it was the Burns-Foster Act of election in 1960. It was a bond measure that was being put before the voters to build the state water project. Now, that was the project that brought water from Orville all the way down to Southern California and fed the San Joaquin Valley all the way down to Southern California. But the vote didn't occur until November of 1960. As you can see, they formed in 1959. Rolling the dice. They figured that it was going to pass. Well, in this case, they turned out to be right. But it only passed by less than 1% margin. So they got a little lucky. The water wars between Northern California and Southern California were just as difficult in 1960 as they are today. And that measure barely passed and gave them an outlet, and eventually they were able to bring, in 1975, where they actually delivered their first bucket of water into the San Gabriel Basin. The municipal waters, the Upper San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District, started their activities in 1960. They formed in 1959 and started operations in 1960 and started developing water into the San Gabriel Valley as a part of their mission. In the early 1960s, there's a place up in the San Gabriel Canyon. If you go up towards Morris Dam, you can see a little pipe. It's not so little when you get close to it. But a pipe, USG-3, comes out of the wall there and delivers water into the San Gabriel Basin. And so early in 1960s, water started to be developed. So here's a map that shows those boundaries of those areas that were developed. First of all, on the right, on the east end of the basin, you got 3 valleys, the area in red here. Was the Pomona Municipal Valley Municipal Water District, but they changed the 3 valleys because that's a little more descriptive. Because the area they represent actually covers 3 valleys, the Pomona Valley, San Gabriel Valley, and Walnut Valley. 3 valleys. So that's how it became 3 Valleys Municipal Water District. The gold areas are the 4 cities. Sierra Madre, Azusa, Monterey Park, and Alhambra are separate. And you can see how they're not contiguous. They're just 4 cities that decided they didn't want to be a part of what everybody else was doing. And I can tell you today, those 2 municipal water districts work really well together. And it's kind of nice to have both a state water contractor and a municipal water district representing Metropolitan Water District, both in the same basin. That provides us multiple options when we talk about bringing replenished water into the San Gabriel Basin. So although in 1960 it was a roll of the dice, it was a difficult decision to make, people were not happy, the bottom line is that it's actually a very good thing. So the second issue that we had to deal with here in the San Gabriel Valley in the 1950s, really important issue, had to be dealt with, and that was the allocation of water and flow. Now remember, people in Central West Basin were really upset because water wasn't flowing through the San Gabriel River, down into through Whittier Narrows and down into their area. So the result was, because of this lawsuit that was filed by the City of Los Angeles and Cerritos, a joint suit along with Central Basin, is they ended up with a settlement, a judgment, that said that a certain amount of water had to make its way through, on a yearly basis, make its way through the Narrows into the Central and West Basin. Now that decision and that judgment, that was a stipulated judgment, was not easily come by. As a matter of fact, if you go back and you read the records, a delegation of directors from the upper district, from the association, and people from the Central Basin, including Long Beach, they decided they were going to get together in a motel, and they sequestered themselves in a motel for 1 week without attorneys. And they spent time in this motel for 1 week and worked out an agreement, a skeleton of an agreement, and then turned it to their attorneys. And it took 3 years after they were given the skeleton of an agreement, 3 years to finally get this agreement done. But they finally got it done, and that created the river, San Gabriel River Water Master, which essentially governs the amount of water that goes between the two basins. Keep track of it. There was a third problem, because now we had a situation where people couldn't just pump unlimited amounts of water in the San Gabriel Basin. There was a limit, because we couldn't no longer replenish all this water coming out of the mountains. So we had another issue had to be dealt with, and that is who could pump what in the San Gabriel Basin. And again, no issue in water is easy. It came down to attorneys and negotiations, and in 1973 a stipulated judgment was entered that created the San Gabriel Basin Water Master, not to be confused with the River Water Master. The Basin Water Master is the agency that oversees the judgment, sets the operating safe yield of the basin, that is how much water every year can be pumped safely, and manages withdrawals and replenishment. They keep the accounting. They also oversee the physical solution. So as things need to be built and created and diverted and all those things, that's the agency that does it. Now in 1979, another issue came up that nobody had ever anticipated. The contamination of the aquifer. In 1984, the U.S. EPA, after having done much research and work with San Gabriel agencies, put the San Gabriel Basin onto the Superfund list, National Priorities List. A number of things were tried from 1985 to the early 1990s to deal with the issue. None of those were working. And finally, in the early 1990s, the EPA issued a white paper, essentially a policy statement. Said there is no agency in the San Gabriel Valley that has the capability of dealing with this issue. No agency has that power to govern and deal with these issues. We suggest that an agency be developed that has all of those powers and works cooperatively with all of these different agencies to clean up this massive problem. This is the largest Superfund site in the country. So what came about was the creation of the San Gabriel Basin Water Quality Authority, the agency that I represent. In 1990, it became a joint powers authority for the first couple of years, and at the same time there was legislation going through the Assembly and the Senate that created the agency, and in 1993, the agency, as a state agency, became actively involved and is operating still today. Again, this is kind of a recap on what I've been talking about. Here's the population growth in the San Gabriel Valley. So you can see Pasadena is growing first. Pomona's not on here, I apologize. We didn't put Pomona on. But Pomona would look like Pasadena if you had it on here. Start to see, not every community is represented. I wanted to kind of give you an idea of the kind of growth that was going. Starting in the west, and growth then went east. Now 1940, this is, again, just before the Second World War, 155,000 people within that black boundary called the basin. Look at the growth between 50 and 60. In 1970, we're over almost 600,000 people within that black boundary of the basin. 1980, 666,000. 1990, 820,000. Things start to slow down here now. 868,000. Now what we're seeing is shifts throughout the valley between where people live. So here we are today. Within that black boundary called the San Gabriel Basin, there are 870,545 people who live. Now the basin serves a larger population. As a matter of fact, the basin serves a population of around 1.25 million. Because water is exported outside of our basin in some cases to serve places that are outside of that black boundary. And so our basin is a really important part of the strategy for the development of these communities in our area. Again, let's go back to this kind of a rehash of what's going on. We saw in the 1940s and 50s, we had crops going into the 50s now. Remember, post-war, we've got industry starting to come into the San Gabriel Basin. Those industries are starting to use cleansers, contaminants. They're dealing with them how they think they should. As a matter of fact, they're considered best management practices. They put them on the ground. They allow them to seep into the soil. And so we end up with these contaminants now going into the soil, into that unsaturated zone, the vadose zone. '60s, 1970s, that contaminant that was getting into the groundwater is now starting to have an effect. Our cities are growing. 1960s, I grew up in the San Gabriel Valley. I can tell you there were still a lot of orchards in the San Gabriel Valley in the 1960s. Now we got a plume of contamination. Early 1970s, we start to detect that we've got a contamination problem. At that point, we thought it was only volatile organic compounds. Later, we found out it included a lot of other exotics. So we got all of our wells now, many of our wells in the San Gabriel Valley are starting to pump up contaminated water. So what did we do as a basin? We started to build plants to treat the contaminated water, and made the policy decision that we were going to treat that water and serve it to the public. That allowed us to have a revenue stream and allowed us to use that water. We were treating and serving it to the public. Revolutionary in this country as for a groundwater remediation site. As the theory is that once the site remediations are done on the different sites and we keep pumping that water and serving it to the public, at a point in time in the future, all that contamination is going to be gone. That's the good news. Bad news? Some of you kids who are in the audience today may still be around during that period of time, but the rest of us aren't. It's up to you guys. This is going to take decades to do. One, because we don't know whether we've got the contamination out of the ground completely yet or not. We think we got most of it, but we don't know. And secondly, it just takes a long time to pull all that constituent out of the groundwater. So at the Water Quality Authority, we're dealing with that. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's kind of a rough history of the San Gabriel Valley water policy.
That was fabulous. We have about 5 minutes, so we can take a couple of questions.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay?
No problem.
Are there any questions from the audience? Sir.
I wondered what your plan for the future.
There's a mic right there. Since we're such a big crowd, I think we better try to use it. Thank you.
I heard the other day that the predictions for earthquakes here in the next 30 years is 94% for a major earthquake. I wonder how you see this fitting into the water situation.
Well, disaster planning has always been a part of the water industry. One of the things that I've always enjoyed about being a part of the water industry is that the people in the water industry, going back to the beginning, we're talking about Mulholland and prior to Mulholland, the people in the water industry, and it's just as true today as it was back then, are always thinking decades ahead and are thinking about solving problems well out ahead of the problem. That's one of the reasons why we're having this conference here today. The goal of today's conference is to start a process of allowing people in the San Gabriel Basin, policymakers in the San Gabriel Basin, you, to be able to help us deal with problems in the future. One of those is earthquakes. Now, we saw the Metropolitan Water District develop Diamond Valley Reservoir a number of years ago, starting in the year 2000. Took a number of years to build it, and it's out in Hemet, 800,000 acre-foot reservoir. That's the first reservoir, major reservoir, that was built on this side of the San Andreas Fault. So if we have a major earthquake in Southern California, there's up to 6 months of water in Diamond Valley Reservoir in order to be able to serve the public in Southern California Metropolitan Water District area while repairs are going on from the earthquake. So that's part of the decision-making process. Everybody here who's in the water industry has contingency plans on how they're going to deal with water and how they're going to deal with the delivery of water. Now, we don't know exactly what's going to happen with an earthquake, whether it's going to hit Whittier or whether it's going to be San Bernardino that gets hit the hardest. But everybody's got a contingency plan based upon the severity of the earthquake and the problems that they occur. And I can tell you the water industry is prepared for those kinds of disasters. So I feel good about the future in terms of those kinds of catastrophes. Yeah, Bill.
Good presentation, Ken.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah. That's the easy question. Okay, go on.
Could you fill us in on the St. Francis Dam? Perhaps Henry Mulholland, or maybe one of the panelists later today can bring that up, but perhaps Henry Mulholland needed a geologist or two.
Yeah, St. Francis Dam, every engineer I know of has their good stories and they have their bad stories. That happened to be a disastrous story. And you first got to know that Mulholland had a tremendous ego. You couldn't do what he did if you didn't have an ego. This guy thought he could conquer the world. But Mulholland was not formally trained as an engineer. He was an engineer, but he wasn't formally trained as an engineer. And as you said, he didn't quite know as much as he should have about geology. And that dam did fail, and unfortunately a number of people were killed as a result of it. One more question.
Well, what impact would the practice of fracking have on the water contamination process?
This is more of this is Ken Manning now talking, not the water industry. Fracking's been going on throughout the United States for decades. And so far, those of us in the water industry are not really detecting any real problems. Now that doesn't mean we aren't going to have problems. Because, as you know, if you do anything to excess, you can cause problems. And I got a feeling that as pressure is put on oil companies to acquire more and more product, that they're going to push the envelope in fracking and create problems. So most of us in the water industry are supporting legislation in California, at least, that allows for those of us in the